Hello, I'm Noel Kingsbury, and with Annie Gelfoyle, together we run Garden Masterclass. Welcome to our YouTube channel. We put here the recordings from the session we do every Thursday evening at 6 o'clock London time, a practice we started during the April 2020 lockdown as a way of reaching out to the global garden and landscape community. We hope you enjoy this recording, but also please do check out our website for all the amazing range of information-packed webinar and workshop recordings we have. Maybe consider joining us because members get access to our vast archive of free material as well as discounts on the webinar recordings. We've also recently started a podcast channel on Substack. So we do a weekly podcast and so that's a way of accessing a lot of our recorded material that you can listen to whilst you're digging or driving or watering or whatever else. So I very much hope you enjoy this recording and looking forward to keeping in contact.
Right. Okay. So, hello everybody. It's Thursday night. It's 6 o'clock. Welcome to Thursday Garden Chat. It's me flying solo this week. Noel is busy. I was away last week, so we're sort of we're taking it in turns. And just a little bit to say before I introduce tonight's guest. You've probably, well, you will have all noticed we've got a fancy new website, which we're really pleased with, but we really would rely on everybody to give us comments and feedback if there's things that are not working or you're not finding things, because we're hoping it's more streamlined and it's a better fit, but we need feedback. So if like I say, do email us if there's anything that you're not sure about. We've started our winter courses. So we did a few courses. The courses slightly vary from webinars in as much as they're linked together. So we started last night with Paul Hensey, who is starting beginner's SketchUp. And that's going to run for 8 weeks. And then he goes into advanced SketchUp, which will take us into the new year. And then he's going to be doing his a course on construction detailing. We've also got a course starting with Magda Pelker on digital visualization, as well as webinars dotted through. So it's quite a full calendar this year, actually. There's going to be quite a bit of Zooming during the winter months, which is good. So they're all on the website under courses, easy to find, and webinars. So if you look at what's on, everything is there, but courses are listed separately. If you're not a follower of Garden Masterclass and you want to just get a newsletter, we send out a newsletter once a month telling you what's happening. Then just sign up, and on the newsletter we only send one out once a month just to keep you up to date. So really that's kind of all that's happening at the moment. So I'll move straight into introducing our guest this week, and it's Julie Witmer, who's in Pennsylvania, East or Western Pennsylvania. And I actually met Julie in person in April this year in a quite a strange, not a strange way, but it wasn't strange at all, but it was a lovely way. I arrived at the Dixter Plant Fair, opened the door, sort of put a foot out on the grass, and I heard somebody talking to Fergus saying, "Oh yeah, I'm from Pennsylvania," and my ears pricked up immediately, because if Pennsylvania, then I think, well, I must know them if they're from Pennsylvania. And I think, oh, and then kind of everybody went off into the plant fair, and then a little bit later on I had a tap on my shoulder and Julie said, "Hi, can I introduce myself?" And we stood and had a good old chat. And that's the thing about the Dixter Plant Fair. It's as much about meeting and catching up with folks as well as buying plants. And we've just had the autumn plant fair last weekend. Julie wasn't there, unfortunately. But anyway, Julie, it was lovely to actually meet you in person. And it was so nice to actually have a good old chat, and then lots of people in common. So anyway, welcome to Garden Masterclass.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Annie. Yeah, that was such a treat. I would highly recommend it. I know, because people plan trips over to Planet to go at the time of the plant fair. You can't bring anything home, of course, but it was just a delight to get to see everyone and get to see so many wonderful plants, and then to have Great Dixter as your kind of chill out moment, to take a walk away from the crowd and walk. It's just kind of the most magical weekend.
Yeah, but while you were over, you went on a sort of a sort of, well, I was going to say kind of breakneck speed tour of English gardens. And when you said, because I said, are you going to go down to Wildside? Yep, that's the other end of the country. You're going to go up to Beth Chatter. I mean, you visited quite a few gardens in a very few days, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. I think it was an American's trip to British Gardens, because we hit the road and we did it. Yeah, we swung up to Iford, and we actually also down then Wildside, and we got to swing all the way up to Ashwood, and
that's amazing, fantastic.
We had tea with John Massey and got to see his hepaticas, which is we had to get up there and see those.
Wow.
So being native plants to this area as well. So yeah, it was a wonderful trip. But then we got to spend about 4 days at Dixter, right in the middle, and it's very grounding and special to be there right as the tulips were bursting open those few days. So
it's a lovely
it was a magical moment.
So Julie, apart from us just having a little chat about what's wonderful about life, I mean, actually, before we move on, I was stood at the plant fair this last weekend, and I looked at and we were chatting, a whole group of us, and we were saying, if only the world was like the Dixter Plant Fair, if the world operated like the Dixter Plant Fair, full of lovely people, happy to see each other, just, lots in common, smiling faces, that would be the best thing ever if the world was Dixter Plant Fair.
Amen. Right. So, and I think that I kind of get some looks from people when I say, tell them just my love and admiration for Dixter. But what you just said, that's exactly it. What
it is,
the generosity and the kindness. And that is really ultimately, something that I think even as American gardeners, that's a goal of mine, to try to bring that energy here and, hopefully show it through my own garden. So I garden in Western Pennsylvania, which is, to give you an idea, that's 300 miles and a mountain range away from Chanticleer and Lockwood Gardens. We're at the opposite corners of our long,
because Pennsylvania is kind of that shape, isn't it?
It is long rectangle. And so I don't get over there very often. And so I know I missed you when you were over here, because I had another speaking engagement, but so we are, I kind of am in this special area, because the Great Lakes, come down, and the lowest point of the Great Lakes, and then the side of the Appalachian Mountains make this little squeeze point, and I am right in the middle there. So in the top northwest corner of Pennsylvania.
Right.
It's an interesting area. We get quite a lot of birds that, come through this way, because it's kind of a channel, which my husband loves because he's a birder. And so it's an interesting area. And my friend Joel, who you also met.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
He actually lives and gardens just 5 miles away. And so where I am, it's clay, but where he is, he has these vast sand deposits from the glaciers. So from, coming down, that was, part of the Great Lakes. So so it's a really interesting area to garden. It's also difficult in a lot of ways, because it is more of a continental climate. We get much colder weather than you all do, and we get much hotter weather than you all do. So we have the extremes. It gets quite cold here, and so we have that to deal with. And yet our rainfall is pretty consistent, and we have the green rolling hills of Pennsylvania.
And what zone are you in? I mean, because obviously, every American wears their zone on their, it's like, they know what zone they're in.
Horticulturally zone 5, 6. Technically, they moved us to 6. But just, the problem, as I'm sure you've heard, is that they calculate those numbers with the average, and
Okay.
weather is rarely average, you
Yeah.
get extremes.
Mhm.
And so even just last winter, we definitely had solid zone 5
Right.
cold weather, which can so can be quite cold. So so it's challenging to garden here, but I also, we're not near any coast. So we're we're 400 miles from New York and the High Line.
Right.
And but I'm also 450 miles from Chicago and Pete Odof's gardens and all that going on with Roy and all that out there. So, but I'm only 60 miles from my nearest botanical garden, which is Phipps Conservatory, and
Oh, right.
which is a godsend to us in the winters of Pennsylvania, when we can go inside there for the orchid and the bonsai show in January. It's almost as good as, going to Florida for the weekend.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult place to garden, and we're also very rural here.
Right, right. And is that where you grew up, Julie? Are you from that area originally? Yeah.
I am. I've lived my whole life in Western Pennsylvania, and actually, interestingly, after we moved to this small town, I found out that my ancestors from 200 years ago were some of the first to live there, and I had no idea.
Wow.
So it's kind of surprising. I had no idea when I came back, but interesting how we gravitate to what feels familiar, I guess. So
yeah. So Julie, before we talk about kind of how you operate now, because that's the gist of this evening, is kind of the way, what you do and how you do it. But what's your backstory then? How did you get into horticulture and design? And tell it. Well, have you always been in gardens, basically, or not?
Yeah, no, I do not have the classic childhood story of growing up in gardens. We were rarely outside, actually, and I did always love flowers. When I was little, I used to say I wanted to be a florist. But we were rarely outside, and so not in gardens. We did visit Phipps Conservatory a few times, so there's a budding point there. But I became, I grew up, I went to college, became a teacher. And it was actually when I was done teaching, when I was done getting my certificate almost as soon, I was 23, and I went to work at a nursery instead of going directly to teaching. And that was what did it for me. I learned about plants. I felt hook, line, and sinker for plants, and propagating plants, and being in the greenhouse on a winter's day doing rosemary cuttings and pelargoniums. And so it was just that's where it started. And then I became obsessed with reading about British gardening in particular. And so I went to my small town. It really, I think I blame it on the small town library, because, a lot of the books were older. They were well read. And so they had all of Christopher Lloyd's books. They had a few Beth Chatter. They had, some John Brooks and Penelope Hobhausen. That was about it. And so I just read them, and then I started sending away, getting more. And so this idea of succession planting, it's just electrified me. I thought, this is the way to go. And specifically Christo's book, which I just found out like last year, that Fergus had quite a lot of influence on the succession planting for year-round pleasure. But that book, and just thinking about also growing in different conditions. So Beth Chatto, and the bogs and the rock gardens, and then I've become interested in just traditional gardening crafts. So topiary and the hurdles, and I even started doing my own pottery in the last few years. So I love the idea of making my own pots for what I want to grow. I do plant photography, and I do have have some photos in the Primrose Lovers book. There's some from Chanticleer that I took on a glorious day, and those photos are in that book that I love. And then I write about gardens. So I write about my making this 1 acre garden. It's the second garden I've made. The first one was a bit smaller, bit of a postage stamp, and then I'm making this garden. We're right in town, but it's a small rural town, and we call it Havenwood, and it's about half wooded property. And I think because we're inspired by that Dixter spirit of generosity, and we were able to open, actually, so we've so open gardens are not really a culture here in the US, but it's kind of catching over on the East Coast and with the Garden Conservancy, but it's just not a thing that people do around here. So I can't tell you how many times this summer we opened twice, and I had to just explain what it was. It's just come walk around my garden, and sometimes people, think like, are you showing me?
What's the catch?
Like, what are you? But it, people loved it, and it was. We're going to be open next year for the Garden Conservancy, so the first garden in our area, along with Joel's garden, will be open as well. And so just wanting to create a center to share it, and hopefully in the future, doing more of maybe having children's classes, maybe having adult lectures right here, just in our home. And so I think that kind of gives you an idea. I think when you live in a rural area, you kind of have to be self-sufficient in what you're doing. And so it's like there aren't many reliable gardening businesses you can rely on. We do have a couple wonderful nurseries, but there aren't tons of nurseries, and so there are, and there are almost no paid professional gardeners.
Right.
And so as a designer, when I start to try to help people through a plan, you quickly realize that this cannot be a process just of drawing it up and handing it off. It will never happen. So being a rural gardener means kind of from the get-go weaving in this garden coaching, which Noel asked me to talk about, and just weaving it into the whole process. So it's not really this tacked on thing at the end. It's this thing from the beginning. Right. Immediately when we start talking, we're working through, a lot of things to help so the whole process can be successful.
Now you mentioned your photography, and I know you've got some rolling images. So do you want to set those rolling, and we can carry on chatting? What I'm interested to know is, did you phase teaching out and gardening and garden design in? So did you do the two together, or did you just stop and start? How did that happen?
No, I've been doing it all together. So in the sense that I actually home educated my own children. So I have three children, almost grown, one gone, two still in high school, upper grades. So so this is my home garden, Havenwood. All these pictures are from
your garden,
my own garden, Havenwood, which is in Western Pennsylvania, and we have built this over the last 11 years, while living as a family here, and delivering truckloads of sand, and the kids having a week at the beach, and then us moving it all with wheelbarrows, and it's been a family project.
Family affair. So what made you what was it that made you think I need to organize coaching and bring that into the design process? Where at what point did you think, I can't just deliver a design and say to these people, off you go, here's your garden, you know, call me if you need me. So how did that happen, that realization that people actually needed this other sort of you know, a service in a way, or rather unique service?
Yeah. So as I said, you know, being in a rural area, you're kind of made to be more self-sufficient.
Yeah.
And what I realized as a designer, and I should say, I started with people right around me, but for the last decade, I've been working with people actually coast to coast across the US.
Oh, wow.
So I did I did a musician's garden in Nashville, and he put me in
Wow.
his book a few years ago. And then so it kind of
Yeah.
exploded. You know, people wanted to get in on, you know, having someone to talk to help them through their
Yeah.
issues with, you know, their property and what they were dealing with. And so, and I realized that if I wanted them to be successful,
Yeah.
that I needed to slow down.
Yeah.
I needed to ask a lot more questions.
Yeah.
And I needed to, you know, walk them through so that they felt comfortable.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like these things you're saying, the pond, you know, a kitchen garden, the people look at these things and it you know, it feels overwhelming
Yeah.
to them. And so, and rightly so, it, you know, it takes some time and intention planning. It takes figuring it out, you know, to know how that's all going to come together. But and so I realized that I needed to empower them and think more about collaboration with the people I was working with my clients, to empower them so that they can know what to do, because they are the ones who are either going to do the work themselves or pay for it, right?
Yeah.
So I needed to, I think, have a position of humility towards them, and really validate and listen to their concerns. And what I, you know, I'm not selling as much a product, but a state of being, you know, the state of being a gardener, because and for a lot of people, like I said, we're kind of very far from everything else, and so it isn't a common experience in the US to actually have even gone to a botanical garden or to see a more intensive planting.
And how do you get that message across? Because I mean, you were saying that having an open garden was a bit sort of odd. You know, people are thinking, oh, you know, what does that mean? You've opened your garden. So given that you are, you know, you're a bit of a maverick there, and so how did you first launch into saying, well, this is how I'm going to do it? And were people receptive to that? You know, the slightly different way of working with the designer, but were they really kind of relieved about that you were going to help them?
Yeah, I think so. I think relieved is the word, because people have, and this kind of gets to another thing. People kind of have a lot of baggage about their gardens, you know, about especially residential gardens, which is what I like to do. I have done some commercial projects, but I just like working in the personal residential gardens for many reasons. For one thing, I do love children, and I love, you know, as a teacher, love teaching children. And I realized that if I could, you know, help families get over the hurdles, that those children could grow up, you know, like my children have gotten to grow up with all of these, they know these plants, you know, and sometimes they'll say, Mom, the kids, they don't know what a plant is, you know, but I think it's by living with it every day. And seeing it grow and seeing it bud, and now seeing those, you know, this pond, you know, it's all like dead looking stalks out there and the seeds are dropping, you know, by living with it, get to know it in a totally different manner.
And how does your formula work? Is it different with different people? So do you, for example, say, you know, here's the design that we, you know, we're going to implement it, and I'm going to come and see you once a week or once a month, or we'll have a Zoom call or whatever. So is it different with different people, or do you have a sort of set way of you know, have you got a formula that kind of applies to everybody?
Yeah, so I'd say the answer is both.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Some
If
of
everybody's
both.
different, yeah.
Because I do have, sure, I have standard steps that I'm, working through. Right now I have kind of 3 clients that are kind of all going, and they're at different places in the process. And yet I think I do a lot more of putting the ball in their court and asking them, what would you like next? So here are the options. We can go this way, this way, this way. Which option do you want? And that comes down significantly with concept plans, concept designs. When you get to that point in the process, I really try to come up with multiple ideas that would work. Once I've looked at the utilities and the slope and, all of the things that, are sometimes difficult for homeowners to remember to, add all those things up. If I can come up with 3 or 4 different ways of putting together a problem, and I like doing that. I'm kind of a problem solver. I'm also kind of a helper. So I like helping people solve their problems, and I like being creative and thinking of different ways to do it, and then letting them choose. Right. So that's because, again, they're the ones who will be living there. They will be working, building this from scratch in most cases. I mean, a lot of places in the US have actually really not been gardened before. So there's not, the soil, they may have been clear cut. Yeah. And that was it, and so the soil structure is not there. There's just a lot of that needs to be built up over time. And I do talk about the slow process being best, actually. And so giving them, the residential gardeners, the skills that they need so they can make and maintain these things. And then just the fact that, the skills that we have, if you think about it, I mean, I have a fruit tunnel, I have an entry garden. If I hadn't known how to make a fruit tunnel in a cost-effective way, because I couldn't afford a big metal structure, I couldn't pay for someone to solder that at that time. I used bamboo canes and ties of all sorts, and I used rope actually to bend it over, at the top. And the way you are doing it, the skills of the gardener create the garden. So you're never going to make a garden that you don't know how to do. So it's just that idea of like, what support does each client need? And actually, so the very first part of my process is to have them first fill out a survey, because I do get people very often who say, oh, I'd love a garden design, and I always say, great. Here's my survey, fill it out. It's like an intake survey. Here's my survey, fill it out. And when you've done that, then you'll be on the wait list, because a lot of people, they'll say, and I've had people so many times be like, oh, I'll send that. I will do that today. I've never heard from them again. And it's not that they're bad people. It's not that they're lost and that they won't ever get there. I certainly understand. I have 3 children and a rabbit. Life happens. And so, that is life sometimes. And yet, as a 1-person office, I'm the only person. I'm trying to see, like, okay, who's willing to put in the time and fill this out, and then we'll work at getting a spot on the schedule. So it's all about buy-in for me. It's about client buy-in from the beginning. Like, okay, I would love to help you. Can you spend the time? And so right when they start filling that out, I start asking questions like, what's your favorite season? Of course,
Mhm.
what are your favorite colors? What styles do you like, and all that. But
Mhm.
it's trying to bring them along on
Mhm.
the journey, not just give them a solution. And so before our first meeting, I asked them to send me photos of their garden,
Mhm.
the spot that they want to work on.
Yeah.
So that they're clear, what they take the time to think about what they want. And because my goal for the first meeting is to learn about them and to walk away with a list of their current concerns.
Mhm. Mhm.
And getting to the bottom, like getting to that list, actually, I find can be difficult because what you want, a lot of us aren't trained to
Yeah.
think about what we want.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So when you say to someone, well, what do you want here? And of course, they may not know all the options. So
Exactly.
there's
Yeah.
that too. As a
Yeah.
designer, I'm saying, well, did you know you could grow a rambler on your house?
Yeah.
Options of what you can do is part of my job. But I think the deeper part for me that I think I've never heard another designer talk about this. And I kind of think this is my magic sauce, so to speak.
Yeah.
Is that I really try to value the emotions that
Mhm.
the client walks into the process with,
Mhm. Mhm.
because there's often a lot more there than appears on the surface.
Right.
They might be really sad because they just lost some trees or plants they loved. They might have just lost the physical ability to care for their garden the
Yeah.
way it was,
Yeah.
and now they can't. They might be nervous because they don't understand the design process,
Mm.
and they're unsure about where you're going with things, and they might be uncomfortable because by definition, when they bring their garden to you, they're showing you the problems, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that can feel like walking into the confessional.
Yes.
This
Yes.
is
Yeah.
my personal weaknesses here, and so I hear a lot of people apologize, oh my goodness, yeah,
Yeah.
I was supposed to take care of that years ago, but it's still sitting there,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so you're kind of walking in a tender place
Yeah. Yeah.
with people.
I think that is one thing about gardens and plants, is that people do immediately blame themselves for any losses or problems, or oh, it's my fault because those seeds didn't germinate, and it was my fault. Well, perhaps it was a duff bag of seeds. I mean, it's I think people are very quick to just say, because often I think people think that gardening often is like a dark, mysterious art, and actually, as you know, it's common sense a lot of the time, but people often are quite intimidated by it, aren't they? Thinking that it's beyond me, this thing.
Yeah.
Do you find that people generally are happy to go with what I'm calling the kind of slow gardening method that you're talking about, developing a garden? Do you ever get people saying, look, I just want it and I want it by next Monday? People are quite happy to enter into that nice slow process with you of developing. That's really interesting that
Yeah,
they don't.
I would say those aren't the kind of clients who are probably attracted to me.
That's great. That's great that you're not, you don't get people that say, I just want an instant garden. I don't really want to know much about it. Just do it.
And that's where I would say in our meeting, I would say that, a garden can't be bought.
We're not for each other. Yeah.
Not well, the garden can't be bought. It's not a product. It is the product of a process of time.
Yeah.
And so that is something I do. I will just talk about that. And so a lot of
I'm intrigued by your clients. So are you generally working with a single person, or one person in the family, or a couple, or is there a sort of usual kind of model to this, or does it just vary from family to family and house to house?
It does vary, but one of the things that I had marked down to mention is that when I have a couple in particular, they almost always differ
Yes.
in their feelings of the process.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you usually have one partner who is looking kind of stony faced.
Yeah.
And all they can think about is the maintenance and the cost.
Yeah.
And then you have the other partner who's what got you to this point,
Yes,
because they're excited.
This
and
is
they
all
want
sounding very familiar, Julie.
yeah, and so I actually think of I joke about it, but I actually call myself in those instances a garden therapist.
Yeah,
because oftentimes I'm kind of going back and forth between the couple, and I'm kind of saying, well, I validate that point. Like, I can see, there are concerning things about maintenance and cost, and we should consider those. But I think we can do that. I think we can have the vision and find a practical way, because if you do not find a practical way, then it will never last. Right. So it has to be practical. It has to be both. So I feel like a marriage counselor a little bit. Where, I'm trying to and actually, I think it's good to have them both there. What's more difficult is when you talk to one and then they go back and you never kind of get to address the other members' feelings. And so, so that goes back to the buy-in. I just want to make sure that the clients feel listened to, that I really have not rushed through that process, that I have listened, that I have answered their questions, that I have, shown them, try to brighten the horizon, to show a bit more. But I've also validated their concerns, because there are real concerns, especially financial concerns. I like that this process makes gardening more accessible to people. And so you asked who I work with. I mean, very often I do work with families of children, and sometimes they're single income homes. And so, the finances aren't there all the time. And yet, I mean, that's actually, by and large, what we've been, as I've been teaching my own children, and in this process of, self-employed and, going back and forth. So, and to me, it's really valuable for those families to make a place where they can have the memories together, where the children are growing up around plants, and where they can create this whole little world. And you can, you can do it. It can be hard work, but it's usually, I always say, the implementation is the hard work. Oftentimes maintaining it is not what you think it is. It's not as hard as you think it might be.
And what happens when, I mean, you can't keep accruing more and more and more clients. So at a certain point, do people say, Julie, we can run with it now. We've arrived, and we might check in with you every few months. But so do you have to sort of, cast them off and say you're on your own now? So how does that work?
So we go through the process, like I said, the intake, the meeting. We, get it. And I often put that ball back in their court again. So I'm saying, I send one, I think an important part of the process is that I send a meeting follow-up, and I usually just sit right there, and I don't use AI. I use my own brain, and I write down everything we talk, everything I can remember. And oftentimes, of course, I'm not remembering exactly, but I'm remembering something else, and I'm adding it in. And so it's a bit of a teaching email, that I'm sending follow-up. And at that point, I always put the ball in their court and say, wonderful meeting you. We can do this, or this moving forward. You just let me know. And I like to step back and let them think about that. And because when they come back, those are the most committed people. And sometimes at that point, then we decide, am I doing a little a small plant list? I mean, I almost always do actually use a for 20 years almost, I've been using Pinterest as a mood board. So it's just an online collection, and I haven't, it's gotten muddy and all that with the extra advertisements and stuff in recent years, but it still works as a mood board of sorts. Where it's they can click on their link, they can see all the plants we were talking about. They can click on those, because I try to use reliable reliable links. They can I would say read more about the plant. Think about if this is something for you. And so they have a direct kind of catalog of links of, it may be also gardening skills. Here's how to edge your garden. Here's how to prune your lavender. Here's how to do, and so it's kind of a category.
That's a really good idea. And it's all there and available. Yes,
it's all there. They just click on the link, and I've been doing that. So you can look at my Pinterest boards and see all of the projects I've helped with over 20 years time. And it's interesting to go back and see, which plants was I suggesting back when, and what do we suggest now. And and I try to educate them. But at that point, like I said, it's their choice. And but then if I'm doing a plan for them, I do it, and then they get a brief with a maintenance plan and installation notes. And so I send them that document, and then again I say I try to set the expectation at that point. And I will if it's my gardens are more complicated than anything I've ever drawn for anyone else. But because I live here, this is my home and what I'm doing, and this has been a hands-on process. But for other people, I'm telling them, this is your 20-year plan. In other words, you're not going to purchase everything on here. You're not going to build everything on here in the next year. You need to realize that to do this yourself from scratch may take that long. And of course, not everyone's doing. Some people are just tell me 3 bushes to put in front of my house, and so that's what we do. We do what they need, but just that kind of setting that expectation for an intensive succession planting. So they know that's normal.
No, that's good. And you obviously, you're based in Pennsylvania, and even my knowledge of geography in the States is not too bad, but Nashville's not on the doorstep. So how does a musician in Nashville find you in Pennsylvania?
I found them originally. So and was speaking to them, and he had a great love for the UK and for everything, everything Anglophile. So he, and I said, do you know I do this? And